Another champion edition, the champion mindset. I have with me here an incredible man, a wonderful businessman. He has a business experience of over 25 years. Yes, that's a lot of experience in business. He is the CEO of Ashanti Produce International, and he's the designate Consulate for Ghana. He is an amazing man, a married man, a father of great children, doing very well, and a husband to a beautiful esquire, beautiful lady who is also my friend. She's a lawyer in Philly and all over the Delmarva area. I'm so happy to introduce to you Michael Griffin.
Thank you.
Welcome so much, sir. I'm so happy that you've been traveling a lot. If you must know, he travels a lot. He's always in Ghana, he's always in Jamaica, he's always all over the world doing business. And his portfolio I'd like to share with you is he is especially for pineapple. He supplies pineapple, and he has a great experience in rice production. That's a field that he's into right now, supplying rice for companies. And this edition, I'm super excited because we're going to talk about deep things. He has great ideologies about life, about business, about government. So we're going to have a great conversation.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I know that you had been to Ghana lately, and you always go to Ghana, and it's exciting to know that he's not an African though. He's an African American, but he has the beautiful piece. He has a lot of African touch to his life. And I know you went to Ghana lately, and you've always gone to African countries. Why are you so passionate about Africa? And that's the first thing I'd like you to share. Why are you so passionate about Africa?
That's a very good question. I think, without a shadow of a doubt, it's a biblical content. The reason why I'm very, very interested and passionate about Africa, and particularly Ghana. In the Bible, Deuteronomy, the 11th chapter, God says, I have a man that I keep my eyes on from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. But it's rain from heaven, and that place is Africa. It is the continent.
Really?
And how I was exposed to Africa was I got this scripture when I was in Barbados.
Oh,
and
wow!
I was on the beach. I was up early in the morning, and during that time, I was doing my my prayers in the morning because I get up about 5 a.m. do my walking and things like that. And I was on the beach, and I just had my Bible, and I had my beach shoes in my hand. I was walking on the Bible, I walked on the beach, and I had my strap on my back, and I just started opening up the scripture, and it landed on Deuteronomy 11. And so from that standpoint, and I said, well, Lord God, where's this land? He said, and without a shadow of a doubt. And it's funny because the hotel that I was staying at was called the Accra Beach Hotel in Barbados.
Ooh.
And I ended up in Accra, Ghana.
Oh, really?
So it was so, right. It was so ironic how these things are, how it manifested. And so from that standpoint, a colleague of mine in Chicago, Reverend Lowe, said, hey, listen, I got a place that you want to go. I said, where? He said, because at the time I was doing cigars, importing cigars from Barbados to the United States. And he said, hey, listen, I got a place where you got to go. You're an import-export guy, and it's in Africa. I said, Africa? I said, man, there's a bunch of lions and tigers and bears in Africa. That's exactly what came to me.
Everyone thinks that. Exactly. When they think of Africa, they just think about lion and think of bears and think of all the animals. Right.
So, from that standpoint, I said, so we went there. The first night that I landed, matter of fact, I went there back in 95, I'm sorry. And from that standpoint, we landed in Accra. We landed during a rainy season. And I remember we went up to this hotel, and it rained so heavy.
Oh.
I'd never seen rain like that before. And Reverend Lowe said, I'm so sorry because the lights had went out.
Right.
He said, I'm so sorry, that this is your first experience, here, because we were supposed to go up to an area called Kafujua. And so, because we was down in our crowd, I said, no, it's okay, it's okay. So the lights went out, and then went outside, and the lights came back on, and I just went out and stood in the rain, and just stood there in the rain, and just watched the rain just hit me so hard. And I think that was like a baptism.
Wow.
That happened. And so, and ever since then, I've been stuck in the continent. And so, from that standpoint, it has gone from just that transition to a spiritual transition for me, going back into my Hebraic understanding, because now I'm a practicing Hebrew, so I speak Hebrew, I read Hebrew, I read Torah. And
oh, you do?
Yes. And so from that standpoint, this whole combination happened from that experience. And so from that standpoint, I'm getting into my, my spiritual. And so the spirit vibration off of Africa was the reason why it kept me so tight there. And then from that standpoint, I go down and visit some farms down into the Cape Coast area down in the Moccasin, which is east, going down into, the Cape area. Right. And a friend of mine, so we stopped off at the side of the road and we saw this pineapple. And so we got out the car and I picked up the pineapple, and they, took the little, corn, the crown of the pineapple, and they shaved it with the knife, and we sat back and ate it like a popsicle.
Really?
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. And so, and it was the most, it was the most incredible experience. And then from that standpoint, why did I get into pineapples? I think it was just a part of my, experience in life and spirituality. And the pineapple itself has major spiritual, reformations on it. It has a lot of spiritual content. Back in the day when the shippers used to come in, the merchants used to come in, and when you brought a pineapple to your guests, that was considered a very wealthy, rich gift to bring a pineapple. Right, exactly. Because those fruits weren't grown here. And so and it was just all this experience, and then me getting the experience how to maneuver pineapples and ship them in, and moving from one box at a time. So it was a very moving experience. Your question is in reference to why Africa. And because Africa in itself is unique, and it's a passion. The reality is that the combination and the connection between the African American and the African.
Oh, that's powerful. And talking about African Americans and Africans connecting, it's something that it's been a challenge in the United States, and I know that a lot of African Americans that are watching, they have a reservation for Africans, and a couple of Africans have had bad experiences with the African Americans at their jobs and things. So the champion mindset, our mission is simply building community alliance and through our inspirational media production. So this show, what we want to do is to bridge that gap, between Africans and African Americans. In this particular episode, let's talk about African Americans. Let's talk about the pain that African Americans has gone through. How can they overcome this pain? You talked about African Americans connecting with Africans. How is that possible? How can we connect? And why are we not connecting? What do you think is the problem?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And majority of my answers will be biblically based. If we don't know the story of Joseph, understand the story of Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers.
Wow.
Right? So we are Joseph in Pharaoh's house. And remember the story.
Oh, wow, that's deep. Right? I've never thought about it.
Yeah, remember the story where Joseph basically was sold into slavery. He went through all this stuff. He went to prison and all that kind of things of that nature. But Joseph got control over Pharaoh's house. And we have control over Pharaoh's house.
Oh, wow.
But it's told in the story that the brothers would starve. They would be having problems. And they would not recognize their brother Joseph. But we are the brother Joseph. And our African brothers who are in Africa have not understood that we are Joseph. And you have to come to us. And we have to connect the dots. That's the storyline. See how the Bible actually has, it is a unique book But there's 5 levels of reading the Bible, we call it. The first level of reading the Bible is called Peshat, which is the literal. The Bible will always have its literal meaning. Then you have exegesis, eisegesis, esoteric, and sod. I read the Bible with esoteric and sod. Those 2 last understandings will give you the revelation of the scriptures. And if you just follow the revelation of the scriptures, it will put you exactly where I'm at. You can't get around it. All of it is said. If you go to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, I shall put the iron yokes upon the neck of Israel. I shall scatter you where the eastern wind blows. Where does the east wind blows? It blows west. Where are we? When the western hemisphere. You should go back into Mizraim by way of ships. There's no people in the history of mankind that has gone back into slavery by way of ships, except for the African American transatlantic slave trade. It is all there. It is all there. That is the Peshat level of reading the scriptures. And if you're reading the scriptures at Peshat, then you'll see what is the next step, the next movement. And so we are supposed to be in a movement. The African Americans and the Africans are supposed to be in a kinetic vibration movement. And so to give that correlation about Joseph in Pharaoh's house is the story of the Commander-in-Chief, Barack Obama.
Oh, okay.
See? He's the Commander-in-Chief. Well, now we have another Commander-in-Chief. But that story was fulfilled.
Wow.
Joseph, the brother. Right. You see?
Okay.
Exactly. You see?
Wow.
So that's the connection. They gotta understand what the connection is all about. And there's some people that what we call Kohanims or rabbinical, which we call rabbis or rabbinical high priest, if you will. I don't consider myself a high priest. I consider myself one of the 12 tribes. I know I am, but at the same time, I have a correlation of who I am from Yehuda to Asher. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So basically, that's the correlation. That's the connection. Okay. And when you see that connection, there's a lot of beautiful gifts inside. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. So we think it's more of there's a biblical connection between African Americans and Africans, and it's important for African Americans and Africans to understand that, and African Americans are the Joseph, and Africans need to understand that, they have to go to their brother Joseph, exactly, to understand the system.
That's the storyline.
That's really important. And I know when I was talking with you earlier, you had talked about African Americans in America, and the importance of Africans understanding the system, and they have to realize that they need the African Americans to understand and penetrate the system. So can you shed more light on that?
Sure. Well, basically, you have a lot of African diplomats who come in, ambassadors and folks who are in the consul and things of that nature, and they really believe that they can come over into the United States and work in the United States. And so with me, I think I've been able to tap into something very, very powerful. Oh, okay. And with that tapping into the spirit, what we call the Ruach HaKadosh, which is the Holy Spirit in Hebrew, you're able to see things at a whole different perspective.
That is awesome. We're going to take a quick commercial, and then we'll be right back. Please stay tuned. He's going to share more about the economy and what he thinks Africa needs to grow, and how Americans, or let's say, people of this region, can go into Africa to invest. Stay tuned. Join me on the show every Friday. Welcome back to the Jemima Show, and I'm your favorite girl, Jemima Chucks, and I'm happy that you joined again. And we've been talking greatly and inspirationally here with a wonderful man, an investor and a businessman, Michael Griffin. He has shared the spiritual connections with Africa, and he talked about earlier the relationship between Africa and African Americans. And one of the things that really got my attention was the biblical standpoint of the history of African Americans, that African Americans are like Joseph in the Bible that was sold into slavery, and his brothers, you know, came finally to seek, you know, help from him, and that Africans, when they come to the United States or when they travel abroad and they see their fellow Africans who are now African Americans or are now, you know, British Africans, those are the Josephs. And definitely before they could really triumph and break into the system, they need to be able to relate with their brothers who are African Americans. I think that's really powerful. I haven't really thought about that. You know, Michael, welcome back to the show. I haven't thought about that African Americans are the Joseph, and I'm so glad that you shared that part. And now let's talk about the economy. We know that Africa is going through a lot of challenges, a lot of political instability. A lot is happening in Africa with the governments and a lot of corruptions and some, you know, especially my country, Nigeria, which is a concern for me. It's a prayer point. I'm praying for my beautiful country, Nigeria, because I grew up in a country that was was good, even though I saw some of the government had some political instability, but it hasn't been this bad. It hasn't been this bad. There's so many things going on. You've been in business for so long, and you've been in business for over 25 years in Africa. Tell us, what is your ideology? What do you think can be the solution to African political, economic instability?
Well, first of all, I think that the biggest thing that Africa needs to understand about themselves is that they can produce their own. We have everything in the ground. Africa's ground is its money, you know, from produce to grains to, you know, natural resources. There's a reason why the Europeans have colonized Africa. You know, the reality is that, you know, you had the Belgian who, you know, colonized the Congo, and you had, you know, the different, you know, French countries who were colonized. And the reality is that the resources are there. But the reality, I think, that you have the relationships that has not been mended. And I think that the biggest thing, the biggest mender of those relationships is, again, your African American brother. The reason why I'm there, the reason why I get the different relationship things that are, people may say, oh, you can't go to Africa, you can't do business with them. I have not experienced that. What I've experienced a lot of opportunities.
Oh, wow.
I've seen a lot of possibilities. I see more possibilities in the continent of Africa than any other place in the world. And the reason why, because 85% of the continent is underdeveloped. They've only developed 15% of it.
Oh, that's
okay.
Hold on first. That is powerful right there. You just said 85% of the grounds in Africa are underdeveloped, and so we only worked on 15%. So there's a lot of opportunities. 85% in Africa.
Yes. And the reality is that, you know, the powers that be or folks or whatever don't want that connection, and the economic force is there. Like, for example, one of the biggest components that you can develop any type of economic engine off of is grains. You know, that's the most stable. Rice is the #1 stable grain in the world. It is the #1 most eaten staple in the world.
Yes,
is rice.
Rice is my favorite.
Exactly.
Too.
So, and what you have over in Africa is that you have the countries that are importing hundreds of millions of dollars in grain.
Yeah, you heard about Dangote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, so matter of fact, I'm trying to work with him myself. I got some things I'm trying to work with him on.
Okay.
So, and that's the connection.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
we can connect. It's like it's not like it can't be connected. It can be connected. So the reality is that you have the grain consumption. I really look at myself as a person who is my calling, if you will, because we all have them, you know.
We all have
and
a
when
calling.
you tap into your calling, then things happen, you know.
Things happen.
I'm there to solve a problem, and so when you solve problems, money comes. So
when you solve problems, money comes.
Exactly.
That is powerful. So what that means is, as a champion, you need to begin to identify problems in your area, problems in your circle, in your environment, in your world, so you can solve it. So in solving that problem, that's where you make the money. That's interesting.
Exactly.
I'm so glad that you're sharing that. So tell us more about investment.
The good part about it is that if anybody wants to do any type of investment over in Africa, I have a company. My company, Ashanti Produce International. Our website is www.ashantiproduce.com. My email is ceo@ashantiproduce.com. You can reach us at 800-295-9790.
Okay.
And we're always looking to have the synergy of possibly investing in the projects that we're doing. The most important thing to me, I think, that if you want to get involved in the continent, it's good to connect with a company that's already doing business there. It's simple.
Oh, so going back to the olden time where trade by barter, where you support each other. You have this, you bring it, and I take yours. We exchange.
So let me ask you a question. What if the commodity crashes? The money. What if the money fails? So what do you have? What becomes the
produce?
You have
produce. When the money fails, you have produce.
That's it. That's where the money has always been.
Oh, so the money is in agriculture.
It's always been.
I have observed things happening in my country, Nigeria. Looking at my country, there's a huge distraction between agricultural produce and the newfound oil. Nigeria found the crude oil, and my country has left, the agricultural section into the crude oil, and they're selling those barrels and thorns of barrels of oil to all the countries, and
right.
the farmers are suffering, and they're crying like, we need technological equipment to produce things, because we import so much of agricultural produce, right. But we have the ground, the manpower, and the resources to actually produce it, but we don't, because Nigeria is distracted. The government is distracted.
Right.
What do you think?
Nigeria is the king of the jungle. They're the lion of the desert,
and they've always had that title, but they're not leaving it.
See, the thing is, and this is where your African American brother comes in.
Okay.
Sometimes we have to have outsiders to kind of get us focused back on what's important. You have, one of the biggest things in Nigeria is the value chain. What is value? What is the value chain? Where is it? Where is the value added? And the reality is that the value chain in Nigeria and throughout West Africa is the agriculture. It's the ground. Because the reality is that you can have all the oil you want, but if you're starving, then what you get? You have a problem. So no one's eating. So guess what? I say him who's got the food controls, not the person who got the oil. Because the reality is that, look, I don't need my car to run, but I sure enough need a bowl of rice to eat. Because if I don't eat, I die.
And finally, on the final thought, we're on the Champion Lounge. And one of the things I like to share here, I like to give out wisdom, So with our guests, I will ask you, as a champion that you are in business and in everything that you have done, I call you a champion because I've seen your work. Your work is excellent, and you have great ideas that, every time I talk with you, I'm just like, oh my God, how did you get to know all this stuff? Right. And please, I would like you to share with our viewers how to be a champion. How were you able to be a champion?
Well, I think one of the biggest things as far as being a champion is you can't let your ego get in the way.
You can't let your ego get in the way. How?
Yeah, you have to understand, when you don't have knowledge of something, let that be a base of gaining knowledge by not knowing. See, because a lot of times when we may get into something and we want to let our ego play, oh yeah, I know this, I know that, but the reality is you don't know, and you make a bigger mistake by not listening and not learning. So to me, I think being a champion is not letting your ego move you. Let the Spirit of God move you. and humility, I think, is a part of being a champion. And yeah, I think that's the key, is the biggest key component is humility, and to be able to say, hey, listen, I may not know it all. When I come in and people ask me, I don't go bragging about what I do and what I can do. What happens is people find out who I am, and then they say, oh wow, I didn't know that you were this. I recall when President Obama had his 47 heads of state, and I was asked to speak at the White House in reference to agriculture.
Wow.
And it was so humbling to be able to speak in reference to that. And so the reality is that, and I tried to be as humorous as possible, because I don't like to be too technical, because I think when you are not as technical and you're basic, it makes it easier. I like to do things on a first grade level, because it helps the person understand whatever you're dealing with. And just like, for example, when we talk about reclaim the grain, you're saying something, okay, we know it's grain, we're reclaiming. So what is that? It's a basic concept. And from that basic concept, you can build off of that. You can build off of that. See? So, it's no need to be a rocket scientist. Only thing it takes is the Spirit of God and humility. And don't let the ego play position.
Wow. That is a mouthful right there. That's incredible. Oh my goodness. I think I should give you Dr. Professor Griffin. Don't let your ego play in the way, okay? Right. And, let God lead you. Be humble. Right. Regardless of what you've achieved, just know that the Lord helped you get it.
Right.
And then, whatever you have today, another person is really wishing and praying to have it. Michael Griffin, we had a great discussion, and please feel free. Can you give your number again and your website?
You can reach us at www.ashantiproduce.com. You can reach us at 800-295-9790. My email is ceo@ashantiproduce.com. You can follow me on Facebook too, as well as Ashanti Produce, and also and that's pretty much and also Twitter. You can also follow us on Twitter as well on Ashanti Produce. So
thank you so much for coming to the show. Appreciate you, sir.
Right.
Thank you so much, Michael Griffin. We are so happy that he joined. And to our viewers back home and sitting wherever you are watching, anywhere you are, the Now Network on the Jemima Show website, thank you for joining. We are so happy that you were able to join, and I pray you find value. I pray that this episode solves a problem in your life and takes you to the next step. Remember that you are a champion. It's in you. You were born to be a champion. Yes, let the lion in you roar. And I love you. Take care of yourself. God bless you.